You asked some different questions, which were interesting to answer. I don't think I've ever said things that way. So I think I even learned some things about myself just hearing you guys asking me questions. But favorite moment would be the sale moment. That was wild.
Mm,
That was got it work in real time while the cameras are rolling,
yeah.
which is amazing. So
Yes.
I love seeing him work like that, even in situations like this. Like you don't plan for those moments, and those are always my favorite.
Your message equals your $1,000,000 anthem. You don't have a sales problem, you have a message problem. If your words don't captivate, they don't convert. I have helped Grammy winning artists craft unforgettable songs, and now we help entrepreneurs just like you craft your business messaging that actually sells.
You don't need more hustle, you need the right strategy. I help scale multi-million dollar companies, and we can show you exactly how to systemize, scale, and dominate the market without drowning in the grind. Welcome to the Conquer Club podcast. What if I told you today's guest went from battling Lyme disease and music industry rejection to writing Grammy-nominated anthems and building communities that empower thousands of creators?
She's not just a Grammy nominated 2-time Dove Award winning songwriter. Her work has been sung by Natalie Grant, Torrin Wells, Tasha Cobbs, and so many more. Krissy Nordhoff is the author of 2 books, founder of Brave Worship and Writing Worship, and the creative force behind the Worship Songwriting Mentorship and the Songwriter Personality Test. Welcome, Krissy Nordhoff.
Hey, thank you guys.
Krissy, we always joke. We say it at the beginning of every podcast, and right here is where the confetti goes. And then, we had Andrew Mitchell on here, and he said, the angels singing and the harps playing. I said, yes, we need all that. So welcome, Krissy.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be here with you guys today.
Well, we are very, very grateful, humbled that you have taken time to be here with us on the Conquer Club podcast. So, if you're an entrepreneur or creative looking to turn obstacles into opportunities, you're about to learn from someone who's built not just a career, but a movement. Chrissy, welcome to the Conquer Club podcast, and thank you so much again. It is an honor that you're here with us on this episode.
Happy to be here with you guys, and I'm so thankful to see what you're doing. It's amazing. So, love what you are doing and happy to be here to contribute.
Chrissy, you've won Dove Awards, been nominated for a Grammy, and written songs from some of the world's top artists. But your journey started up in Michigan and went through years as an independent artist in Nashville. For entrepreneurs listening, what was the hardest pivot you had to make early on to survive and thrive in such a tough industry?
I would say the hardest pivot was coming to town with this expectation that I moved here to be an artist and then pivoting into being a songwriter instead of that. And there were a lot of factors that led me to coming to that conclusion, including really wanting to be a mom and not wanting to be on the road all the time as I was raising my kids. I just remember thinking, I want my kids to be able to play soccer if they want to do that with their friends. And I know God gives different grace to different people, but that was one for me that I really had to change my expectation of what I thought this road would look like. And it ended up being the greatest blessing, making that pivot.
That's so good, Krissy. I think, sometimes God puts a dream inside of our heart and we think it's going to look a certain way,
Yes.
but he continues to evolve and pivot. And I think as creatives, the bottom line is just going for it. And then he
Yes.
will reveal the next one and the next one. And we had Ray Hughes recently, a mutual friend of ours, on here. And I won't get his exact quote right, but Chrissy, he says that dreams don't have to be fulfilled for them to be important, or something like
Yes.
that.
I've heard
Something
him
like
say
that.
that before. And I love that so much. In
Yes.
fact, it was wild because I remember at 14 being in the back pew of our home church on a Sunday night, and we were singing hymns, but that's what we sang in my home church. And we were singing this hymn called Consecrated, and the lyrics say, "Take my voice and let me sing always only for my king." And
Mm.
I thought that meant, oh, I'm going to be an artist. Like I took it literally like, oh, vocals, like I'm going to be doing that. But it
Ah.
wasn't until many years later, I was driving to Nashville on my way to do a song story video for one of the songs I had written with a couple of guys from a church in Houston. And I honestly, I was trying to remember the song story on the way there, and I pulled up the recording, and they had another girl singing the song. But when I heard her singing it, I could hear like my melody sense and my inflections almost in her voice. And I heard the Lord say, do you know what I hear when I hear your songs? And I said, no, I'm not sure what you hear. And I heard him say, I hear your voice when I hear your song.
Mm.
So it reframed that original call,
Mm.
and kind of took away that fear that maybe I missed something. And it was actually on purpose that, I started one way and then turned and went another direction. And it actually fulfilled what he called me to do. He was using my voice, but not exactly like you were saying, Tanya, the way I expected it to be.
Yeah. I think we sometimes will white knuckle grip something so long because we
Yes.
want it our way. And
Hmm.
really, when we just release our hands, he makes it more beautiful.
Yes.
And so let's go back to Kev said you grew up in Michigan
Hmm.
and you studied songwriting under Gloria Gaither at
Hmm.
Anderson University, which is Kevin's stomping grounds. He grew up with all the Gaithers,
That's right.
and we met at Ball State University. So
Mhm.
that is very familiar territory and people to Kevin. How did
Mhm.
that mentorship shape your creative, just how creative you are and your business approach? And what do you think? Because our listeners are entrepreneurs, as are you.
Mhm.
What do you think entrepreneurs can learn about seeking out the right mentors early, or maybe just they come into your path? But how important has that been in your journey?
Yeah. Well, it was wild because I grew up listening to their music, and I remember listening when I was really little to even their children's records.
Mm.
So those seeds were planted in me before I ever had her as a teacher. But I would say I didn't even know at that point in time how to ask for that type of mentorship. I
Mhm.
feel like it was like the Lord leading me to that relationship. And I didn't know what was happening inside, and I couldn't describe it, but I just left in tears almost every class,
Mm.
because every time it was a deepening of my call. And I couldn't put it to words, and I didn't know what was actually happening, but it did definitely change my future path and set me in a different direction. And I grew up on a farm kind of in the middle of nowhere, and where I grew up, artists were songwriters and songwriters were artists, and there were no really other known
Mm.
options, or it was all kind of bundled together. But even I remember writing songs as early as 5 years old, but I remember later taking some songs to my piano teacher, and she wasn't sure what to do with it. So just to be understood by a
Yeah.
woman like her, um, not only that, but then just to have context for how my heart was created, and for there to be someone like my heart. Like for me to understand what she was saying creatively, it really helped solidify my calling. And it affirmed me in a way I didn't even know I needed at that age. But I think that is a big part of what finding mentorship early on does is, and now I get to do that with other young, writers and artists that come to town and get to sit down and have these conversations with them. And it's the same thing. I felt like I was the only one. I didn't know how to do this
Yeah.
and each of their paths is so different in this area, the creative world that I'm in. But there are definite, patterns and things, to recognize in their journeys because I've walked my own and I can, relate to a lot of what they're walking through. But just helping to solidify your calling and just giving you that reassurance, that you can do it and that you're on the right path, and just that there's somebody else like you that can encourage you is huge.
So good. I think a lot of times people, especially when they come to Nashville, or I always say, what's the city you come most alive in? Because
Mm.
that's where you find your people,
Yeah,
basically,
right.
because you're like,
Right.
oh, these are my people.
Yes.
Chrissy's weird like me.
Yes. I used to say that when I got here. I'm not the only weird one.
We're weird together. And
Yeah.
why do we tuck that weird in? It's like, just find your people.
Yes.
And that's what we always say for this podcast. I mean, yes, it's professional. Yes, there's entrepreneurs listening, but we had a podcast this morning that will be released, and she was an Olympic gold winner, and she's from Canada, and we were just, her whole premise is, why do we take the fun out of things? We
Mm.
lose so much fun. And as
Yeah.
Ray says, I mean, the creativity flows from the fun. I mean, that's
Yes.
that's what gets lost in the boardrooms. I call them the
Mm.
BORED rooms. I'm like, if you loosen up a little bit, we can get some real
That's a
creation
really good way to spell that word.
up in here.
Yeah.
But Kev, I know you wanted to talk to Chrissy a little bit. We're going to get a little bit deeper and a little more serious subject.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that you did overcome Lyme disease, which is no small feat. Not real fun to have the opportunity to overcome that. But in that journey, how did fighting for your health impact the way you approached your songwriting? And even more, how did it change the way that you built your businesses like Brave Worship and Writing Worship?
Yeah. Well, I remember getting a tick bite when I was pregnant with my oldest son, and that was in 99, I believe. And back then, Lyme disease wasn't really a known disease. It was
Mhm.
just sort of starting to pop up or just sort of starting to be talked about, but certainly not in our area, in the Nashville area. So I got the tick bite. I got sick immediately, went to the doctor. He said, if you don't have the rash, don't worry about it. I now know that's not true. But it took me about 3.5 years to get diagnosed. So by that time, it was neurological. So it was head to
Mm.
toe. It was tingling, joint pain, twitching. I had a hard time. I remember trying to walk. I had, at that point in time, by the time I knew what was going on, I had two sons. So I'd gone through two pregnancies with Lyme. And I remember trying to sign in at the doctor's office and I couldn't sign in. I couldn't make my hands work. I
Mm.
remember writing what I thought might be my last song,
Hmm.
and no one could figure it out till this one doctor did, and his wife had Lyme, and so now it's his life work to
Mm.
help other people that have Lyme, and he diagnosed me. I went through 18 months of antibiotics, and during that time, it was a very lonely time. Eric was traveling a lot for work. He did international sales. So he'd be gone sometimes for 3 weeks. And I'd had these two little boys to take care of, and I was sick.
Mm.
And that's what helped me to find the heart of Jesus in the most beautiful way. And again, I'll say, even now, I'd never choose that path, but now I wouldn't trade it for anything because of what I learned through it. So I learned to trust in God above all things. I got through those antibiotics and then went to a healing service where I got prayer. And that's what changed everything for me, was the prayer I received that day. After that day, I began seeing that God loved me in a different way. And that changed my songs. And that changed the way that I was able to love other people. And it was around the same time. So I had prayed for a mentor in Nashville, like I had in college, for about 15 years. And it was around that same time where I heard God tell me, be what you need. And so I
Oh,
realized, through all of this, I made it through. I was so thankful to have been healed by that touch of God when I received prayer, and I didn't want to waste anything anymore. I didn't want to waste any time. My energy started to come back, and I wanted to live fully and not waste a moment. So that meant, of course, my family first. That was my first priority, but I wanted to give back. And ultimately, I wanted to be the mentor that I didn't have those first 15 years I was in town. And my songs changed. I wrote a completely different type of song after that experience, and really started writing more worship songs, which is kind of the lane I landed in as a songwriter. Um, so a lot of things changed, a lot of things. Um, but my heart for people grew. And I think a lot of times it's through experiences like that, because our capacity for understanding and for having empathy for other people grows when we ourselves experience that need from the inside. And that's been a beautiful blessing, to experience a need from the inside, get through it, and then on the other side say, how can I help people to get through that same need? And now you know how, because you've walked through it.
I love how you so many things you just said was fantastic. I love what you said about, I became the coach that I did not have. You had that already, that seed was already in you. And because you went through the healing journey, it was able to really start to sprout and harvest, if you will. And you
Mm-hmm.
became so much more than you thought you could. So yeah, sometimes we go through those lows and we don't think it's ever going to get better. We don't realize it's happening for us and not necessarily to us.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
So
so
true.
good. It brings me into the next part or the next question. So many times when I see Chrissy, I don't know what it is, but we laugh a lot together
Mm-hmm.
for no reason sometimes, and for reasons in other times. But we've been friends for a while now, and you've speaking of what you just said, I've been blessed to be a part of your communities that you've built. You haven't built just one, you built two of them. One is
Mm.
Brave Worship, where we were able to go together with a group of women and men, actually,
Mm-hmm.
to Scotland. And then 2 years later, we went to Ireland. Was it 2 years later? I
Mm-hmm.
believe.
Yep.
And so each of your communities serve unique needs, if you will.
Mm.
And you just talked a little bit about community and the importance of communing and unity, and you became what you needed, and building this has been crucial for you. And I always say, man, whenever we fulfill the dream or the desire in our heart, look what it does for other people. It awakens other people's
Mm.
dreams when we awaken and are obedient to our dream. There's a, I think it's a Greek god. I'm not really sure who says it. I can never remember, but he says the man the glory of God is man fully alive.
Mm.
And so you fulfilling your purpose or your dream, that seed, opened up all of these communities and people to get to know one another, have relationship with one another, take trips together. So going back to our listeners, a lot of entrepreneurs, what do you think has the most, as an entrepreneur who want to create a lasting impact and not just a business?
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give them, Chrissy?
Um, I was rattled by a dream that I had one time, and I think this is what motivates me the most and helps to create that impact. I had a dream one time that I was walking through this wooded area and I was marking trees. I was making a trail basically. I was marking trees. I was setting down a path out of stone. I was planting flowers and berries and all of these things. And as I woke up writing a letter. So it started with Dear Next.
Mhm.
When you get to this part of the path, I tried to make it wider for you and I tried to do this and that. And I'm explaining where everything is. And through that experience, I felt like God was saying to me, you could go through this on your own and that'd be great. I mean, that would make an impact. You could, focus on your own career, do your thing. Or if you would take a little more time to make that path a little bit wider, you can open it up for the people coming behind you. So I believe the greatest impact is never just what we can do on our own, but what we can do in community and who we can bring along with us. And mentoring, because as I've mentored some, those people have mentored others. And, that can continue if it has the right framework and structure. And of course, there is a whole business side to that and how to keep that going, and how to pass that on well. And my husband helps a lot with that side of things as well. But
Mhm.
I really think it's listening to the heart of yourself and feeling what the need feels like and then listening to other people's hearts as well. But once you know the need, you know how to meet it. Do that.
Yeah.
Do what it takes to meet the needs and then also make the path wider so it's not just you or it's not just a couple that are you know being mentored or having their needs being met or whatever it is, but that there's exponential growth possible beyond that.
I mean, Chrissy, it's sales.
Hmm.
Everything you've said is sales. You find what their need is
Yeah.
and you serve them, and it
Yeah.
is called a sale, basically.
That's funny, you're
I
right,
mean,
but
that's
yeah,
that's what it is. We always say, you're not trying to convince somebody. You're actually opening up something that they
yeah,
already knew that they needed, but
yes.
maybe had some limiting beliefs, or you just need encouraged, and
Mhm.
you do that so well. One of my favorite sayings is, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle.
Mm.
And that is what you have done so well.
Mhm.
And just one candle can light up a 6,000 square foot
Mm.
dark warehouse.
Mhm.
So how beautiful that dream you fought. Again, it's just that obedience of how
Mm.
he'll talk to you, even as entrepreneurs who
Yeah.
sometimes, like we just talked about in the boardroom, it's like, actually he's telling you what to do next if we just
Yes.
get quiet enough to listen.
Yeah. When you said the word sales right then, Tanya, the first time you said it,
Mhm.
I pictured a sailboat when you said that. Um,
Yeah.
which is funny, but it's true. It also does help people to catch the wind and be carried where they're supposed to go. Um, so I think that was interesting. I saw that picture when you said that.
Chrissy.
That that is so cool. Catch the wind, and I thought you said catch a win,
Oh my
as in
gosh.
sell. So it's all just all flowing and
Wow.
blending all together. So, well,
Well,
you know what?
Wow.
can I say something about that? Because
Go.
Kevin doesn't know this. Just yesterday, I had this exact conversation with a friend who
Whoa.
said, I feel like sales is sales. And she
What?
explained identical to
Nuh-uh.
you.
Are
I
you
promise.
serious?
I promise.
That is so
It's
cool.
actually
Wow.
recorded on a voice memo.
Wow.
So whatever. What?
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. So that's how God is. It's cool.
Yes.
Oh my, that is powerful.
Yeah.
Well, Miss Chrissy, let's talk about some of your hit songs. Just
Okay.
take your humble pie and just put it on the side here. So a couple of your hit songs, Your Great Name and Famous For, with I believe, have both won major awards. Can you share the story behind just one of those songs and how that
Hmm.
experience taught you to trust your instincts
Hmm.
and even when others are doubting?
Hmm. I would have to go with, if I've got to pick, I would say Your Great Name, just because I feel like my testimony is in that song.
Yeah.
And I remember we were at a church um, here in town whenever I had Lyme disease. And that was right around the time, right before I wrote this song. And when I experienced healing at that, I actually flew to Michigan to be at a service and receive prayer.
Mm.
The Lord answered my prayer, and I began to see my symptoms drop and my blood work changed. And when all that happened, we were still going regularly, attending a church here in Franklin. And I just wanted to pray for everyone for healing,
Mm.
because I experienced what it looked like. And our church stepped out and we prayed for healing together for this little boy that had a disease that was terminal. And a week later, the little boy passed away.
Mm.
And it was this contradiction, this I couldn't understand how I got to receive healing, but then this
Mm.
little boy didn't get to receive healing the way we had hoped. And our church was sort of really deflated. And but I knew what I experienced was real, and I still felt like we need to pray every time. And so I went to scripture and I found all the truth I could about who the Bible says Jesus is, and I wanted to stand on it. And I began writing those lyrics of the verses. And then my worship pastor at the time finished it with me, beautifully built out the rest of the
Mm.
chorus, the bridge, and we put it all together. Um, and then that song also taught me how to let go, because we did that song for our church's very first live recording. And when they called the song up, I didn't know if I was going to be singing it or not, but another girl stepped out to sing and my heart sank. But I heard the Lord say,
Mm.
if you'll let go, I want to show you what happens, what I can do with a song if you let
Mm.
go. And so I sang in the choir that night. And then from that point on, it was wild. Before we got through the first verse, people were standing on their feet. And soon after that, Natalie Grant took the song and it flew. I got to watch the Lord take something I couldn't do with my own hands,
Mm.
um, and learn to trust him, and also learned that I can stay home and my heart can travel. And I could stay home and raise those babies. And
Oh,
many years later,
that's so good.
yes, I was very thankful for that.
That's so good.
Oh,
Um, yeah, and it tied into our Scotland trip as well in a crazy
yeah.
way, but it's a long
Yes.
it's a long story, that song.
That's beautiful, Chrissy. I think that, and I know the second half of that story with your great name, but it's so beautiful. It goes back to what we said at the very beginning of this. We have an expectation
Mhm.
and think it's going to look a certain way. And that day I didn't even know this part of your story, but that day your
Mm.
heart was deflated because that's your song. You wrote it.
Yeah.
It's your testimony. Yet somebody else was singing it. So you got
Mhm.
to watch them observe, stand back in the choir,
Uh-huh.
and then quit, let go of the white knuckle grip. And look what
Yes.
God was able to do with the
Mhm.
clay, you know? That's
Yes.
so beautiful. So your songs have been recorded by some of the biggest names, obviously, in Christian music, but sometimes the industry, just like any quote
Mm.
unquote business, can be competitive and
Mm.
frankly full of rejection, as
Yeah.
we know.
Mhm.
And that's just like any business, entrepreneurship.
Right.
How did you, or how do you handle setbacks and still find motivation to keep building, keep innovating? Because you've written, whether it's a song, a book, an online course, an
Mhm.
idea that entrepreneurs have, it can be or feel like a lonely journey.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. I've experienced rejection and all of those things, loneliness, everything that you've said. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs do feel the same way about a lot of things. I have found for me that I have to listen to the voice of God above everything else. So, like you were saying before, He'll give me steps. And the way that I listen is to read my Bible in the mornings. I journal, and then I do what I call psalming, which is singing the Psalms. And that's part of my everyday practice. And I don't skip those things. So, so those things keep me grounded, plugging into what God says first and foremost. That keeps me grounded. And as a songwriter, it's actually considered great success if 10% of your songs get used. So you have to realize, for me, 90% of my work will never see the light of day. And
Mhm.
that sometimes it'll get disheartening and sometimes it'll come in waves, you know. Um, I got to a point earlier this year, where I was feeling kind of low about it all and was talking to God about it and asking for Him to speak to me. And I heard Him say something that picked me right back up. I heard Him say, "It's always been me and you. It's always
Mm,
been me and you. So don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. I'll tell you what we're doing next. I've always told you what I'm doing next. It's not my publisher that opened doors for me.
yeah.
It's not the record label. It's not,
Mhm.
name all the people that are in the line of where a song goes between me and
Yeah.
the radio. None of those things are those people's doings. That's all God orchestrating it. And I know that now because I've had so many miraculous ways that songs have gotten out.
Yeah.
Not conventional ways, not
Yeah.
conventional. The whole thing has not been conventional. So,
That's
yeah.
so, again, it's not how we picture it all the time. Just keep
Yes.
being obedient to the next step.
Yes.
So just because our listeners, sometimes I know, because our listeners are actually very global,
Yeah.
when they hear somebody like you say, and I heard God say, you've said a few times the question
Mhm.
answer, and I heard Him say, and you just said it through journaling, through His Word. Can you just go a little bit deeper? Because people are like, do you hear Him audibly? What's that mean exactly?
Yeah.
So tell an entrepreneur, what does that mean, or anybody.
Yeah. Well, I will say too, there are so many entrepreneurial pieces of wisdom and advice in scripture. So, especially
Mm,
Proverbs. I'm going through
yes.
that with my daughter right now. But just so many things that you may have heard before, but didn't maybe realize that they're in scripture. But
Yeah.
that's Proverbs is the wisdom book. So if you're
Yeah.
looking for wisdom, that's a great place to find it as it relates to relationship, as it relates to business. It's all in that one book. And so what I'll do a lot of times is I'll read and then I'll do what I call two-way journaling, which is I went to a class in 2017 and learned this concept. It felt really weird at first and different, and I grew up very traditional, so it felt out of the box for me. But basically, two-way journaling is prayer, but it's two ways of praying. So you're writing down your prayer, or your questions or your heart or whatever you want to write, and then instead of only writing from your perspective, you stop to listen, to give God room to speak. And so
Mm.
I don't hear him all the time, but sometimes I'll hear this small voice and it'll just sound like one line or one phrase that just sort of drops into my
Yeah.
heart. And I don't hear an audible voice, but I'll just hear a phrase or a word. And I'll write it down and I'll think about it. And then I might go back into scripture and see where I can find it there. But in doing that process, it's been life changing for me. I'll even ask God business advice all the
Yeah.
time. Lord, what should I do about this situation? And I'll stop and listen.
Mm,
And like I said, sometimes I'll hear clearly, sometimes I don't. But the more you know his words,
mm,
the easier it is to understand his voice, and to discern, was that him or was that not him?
yeah.
But his voice is never condemning, it's always gracious and kind.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you'll know it's him.
That's good. That's so good, Chrissy.
Yes.
Very good. I think that's, a lot of times you'll hear people talk like that, but the practical ways, like, what's that? What do you mean he talked to you? And you're
Right.
you're exactly right. Proverbs has 31 proverbs,
Mm-hmm.
31 days in your month. And sometimes I'll just go back to Proverbs in a month and just say, I'm gonna study Proverbs again.
Yes.
But like you said, it's a thought before it's your own. And we're always journaling, like, what do you want from God, or praying what I want from him. But like you said, that two-way is reciprocal, just
Mm-hmm.
like a friendship. If you're the one talking the whole time, how's
Yes.
that friendship going for you? You know?
Yes. And the
So
funny thing is, it'll translate, Tanya. So you do that in the morning. And then guess what? When I get in a writing room situation where I'm
yeah,
co-writing, I'm still I'm still listening for those phrases, and they come. And
yeah,
I'll still hear those phrases come, and I'll write them into songs.
so
And the
true.
same may be true for somebody else in their context. They might hear the voice of God. My son a couple weeks ago, so he's a software engineer, and we were asking for God to speak to him in new ways,
Mm,
and he found a security breach in their software programming somewhere that basically saved the company.
wow,
Which, God can speak that way. So it can look lots of different ways,
Yes.
but
so cool.
it's such a valuable part of how I approach all of
Yeah,
this.
so good. Thank you for going deeper on that.
That is. That is. Well, Chrissy, you are a mentor through the worship songwriter mentorship and your online songwriter personality test. How did you turn your unique gifts into programs and products? And
Hmm.
what should entrepreneurs know about transforming their expertise into scalable impact?
Yes. Well, I would say this is really where my husband stepped in a big way. So I remember when we went to Scotland in 2017, Tanya, you were on that trip.
Hmm.
I had this concept before we left that, hey, before we put people in these co-writes, which is like usually three people all writing a song together, I wonder what it would be like to develop a personality test where I could have everybody take this test. We could figure out their strengths so we could have a good mix of strengths in each room. Like, I wonder if that would work. And I wonder if it would make a difference. So I brought it. We did the test. We did the rooms accordingly. And then we did kind of a free for all right as well. And it just became really clear. Actually, that worked. So I came
Hmm.
home, and Eric, my husband, is an entrepreneur, and he saw potential in that personality test, put it online, found a way to get it online, and now it's the way that it's the first thing in our marketing funnel. So people give us their email, and then they get their personality test result back. And then from that point forward, we've got our focus audience as far as who we're trying to reach. We have their emails. And so we now have
Hmm.
an email list that anything else that we put out, Eric has a system, a whole marketing funnel. So we start with the free songwriter personality test. We have a 10-day songwriting challenge that's around $25. Then we have some courses that are around $100. Then our mentorship is the heart of everything we do, and that's about 500. It's a nine week online course that teaches everything I learned the first 25 years I was here in town. Teaches them how to co-write and so much more. A lot about the heart skill. Um, and then once they graduate that, they can come to our in-person
Yeah.
writing days.
Uh, and I have that business framework, basically, that you two have created as a couple. It is, well, first of all, it's invaluable. I would say you could probably charge 100x what you're charging. But I know that that's where your heart is. I mean, I just think about all the years that you have put into that, really. All the
Yeah.
years, all the conferences, all the teachings, all the educational seminars, all the writing rooms that you have packaged up and put in this program. I've been able to be a part of that. I've walked the course or done the course before. And I would just say to the people, it was at a point that I thought, well, you kind of know all the songwriting things, but no, it's for everybody. I always say whatever in your timeline, wherever you are, whether a beginner or a hit songwriter, it still serves so much to the people, for sure. So like you said, we traveled to Scotland together. And I saw your commitment, Krissy, to, as I said before, to purpose. And it helped unlock, oh my gosh, so much purpose in other people, just being in that land and being with Ray and you. And we were really all a bunch of strangers, really, at the
I
time,
know.
the majority
Yeah.
of us. And now we're all great friends. And it changed me as well, not even knowing you needed it. And so, can you talk about a moment, Krissy, maybe where helping somebody else step into their calling became more rewarding to you than your own successes?
Yeah. It makes me think about our friend Emily. So
Mm,
she was writing songs and leading worship, and someone said something to her from her worship team at church, one of the leaders, that really shut her down. And it's
mm.
funny how it's usually exactly what we're supposed to be doing will receive the most
Yes.
opposition. And so that was the case with her. She was getting all this opposition. This guy said something to her, shut her down. And then I'm in her life 10 years later.
Mm,
And she hadn't led worship that whole time, hadn't done music, hadn't been writing, and just began to love her and encourage her. I'll never forget the phone call when she was sitting in the church parking lot and the new worship pastor had called her in to try out for worship team, and she was terrified. And I remember telling her, write on your calendar, this is the day I overcame this fear. Write it on your calendar today, today's date, and walk in there and go do it. She did it. And anyways, long story short, she's now back to leading worship. She's released, I would guess, close to 10 songs
wow.
with her church, which is a big deal in this area to get
Yeah.
a song on your church recording. So
Yes.
she has just blossomed, and she's got so much joy. And
Yeah.
now she is one of our mentors. So she's somebody that's teaching
Mm,
lots of other new writers with great compassion for where they
yeah.
are on their journey. And she could only learn that by walking through it.
I love that, Krissy.
Yeah.
So beautiful. And I know
Mhm.
who you're talking about. She is just a little joy bomb.
Yeah, she is. She is.
Well, let's talk about your two books. So,
Okay.
Writing with Worship and Psalming, they do offer practical framework for songwriters, but they also are loaded with lessons for anyone starting new.
Hmm.
What's one actionable strategy from your books that any entrepreneur can use in their weekly walk?
Well, for sure, the two-way journaling. So I go much deeper into that in the Writing Worship book. And there's a lot of my story too. So if you want to hear the back half of the Your Great Name song story,
Mm,
it's in there.
that's great.
Um, and I introduce a concept in that book that I go much deeper into in the second book called psalming. And I mentioned that earlier, which is singing the Psalms. So
Mm,
for me, after many years of just reading the Psalms, one day that little voice dropped into my heart and said, these are songs. Maybe you should
mm,
sing them.
mm.
And so I began doing that. And it inspired me so much creatively. I learned more about how to write worship songs by doing that than anything else. So that book has its own, or that concept has its own book called Psalming. And a lot of that is a journal where I'll give a psalm on the left side and then journaling pages on the right. for people to literally journal, or they can write their chord charts and write a new song from that psalm. So both of those have it in it, but more so in the second book. Yeah.
So good. So good.
Yes.
So in that journaling, I'm going to move on to the next question, but I want to make sure. So it's the books are called Writing Worship, and the second one is called Psalming. Is that
Correct.
right?
Yep.
Okay. And so for those people who might be listening today, again, you may feel discouraged and maybe your business launch flopped, or maybe you didn't have as many book sales as you were hoping, or you keep facing rejection. What's the first mindset shift or action you would tell them to make right now, Chrissy? Because we know you've walked through a lot of this, and we have authority in those places when we've walked it, like you said earlier. How can they plug into, well, first of all, we'll start with that question. What would you recommend as the mindset shift or action for somebody to take who's feeling that way?
Yeah. I go back to where I was in January that I was talking about earlier.
Mm,
When I heard God say to me, "It's always been me and you." And I know what that means for me, and I'll translate that. So
okay.
what that means for me is, you love singing at the piano. Just don't worry about all this other stuff. Go
Yeah.
sit at the piano and remember what you love.
Mm,
Remember why you wanted to do this in the first place. So I think many times circling back to your why you're doing what you're doing in the first place, and remembering what you love about it, in whatever your context might look like. For me, I know that's me sitting at the piano. I'm looking at my piano right there. Me
mm.
sitting at my piano by myself. That's what made me start this path to begin with. So going back to that place, I think, is always important.
I love that so much. Remember how it all started, really.
Yeah.
The dreams, the desires that God planted in your heart early on. And how can people, and we'll have so much more in the show notes, how
Mm-hmm.
can people plug into the Brave Worship and your Writing Worship communities and do all of those things?
Yeah. So, Brave Worship, you can find us at braveworship.com. And we've got all of our other social media platforms linked there. And then for Writing Worship, you can find us at writingworship.co. And all of our links for the songwriter personality test and the books and the platforms, the social media platforms, are all there.
Oh, I love that. And back to that personality test,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so beautiful that you all created that, because how many times, or how many people listening, you you're in a room, and let's say it's not even songwriting, maybe it's in the business world, and you have your own unique gifts and talents, and somebody's trying to tell you to manage that person or that team,
Yes.
or
Right.
you're to play that guitar, and that's not your gift and talent.
Yeah.
You're the voice person, you're a PR person, you're
Yes.
charismatic or whatever, and they're trying to put you in a place that's not really your gift and talent. So I think that
Hmm.
songwriter personality test is brilliant.
Hmm.
And I know I've taken that as well. And it should be done for everything. It's just
Aw.
pulling out your gifts and your talents. So I just
Hmm.
wanted to say that for those of you that are listening.
Well, if Chrissy's story has challenged or inspired you, drop your biggest takeaway in the comments. We want to hear how you are conquering setbacks in your own journey.
Yes, and if you know an entrepreneur or a creative or a songwriter, maybe an aspiring songwriter who needs this, share this episode with them. All of Krissy's books, her communities, her courses, and music are linked below. This is the Conquer Club podcast. Keep building, keep believing, and remember, persistence makes the difference. And how we like to end all of our podcasts.
Peace in.
Peace out.
Kevin.
And Tanya Stout. Thanks for being with us, Krissy.
Thank you, guys.
So how many of you are ready to conquer your business, your income, and your life? Hit subscribe and join the Conquer Club, and let's start winning together.
Peace in.
Peace out.
Kevin and Tanya Stout.